I want to start with a word and a concept that Carl Jung brought to us, and that's individuation. And I'm not sure I use it exactly the way Carl used it, but I have to credit him. So individuation is when we're making something ours. Like developmentally, maybe we started maybe with this universal consciousness. We started the development of the independent personality 6 or 7 years old or so. And then we're like modeling, from our parents. We're like learning things by watching what our parents do. And then we learn how our parents do it and that. And then somewhere in adolescence and then into early adulthood, we start making it ours. Like my dad did it this way, but this is my way to do it. And this is kind of that my way, kind of rebellious. It's like we're rebelling from, like, I'm not my dad. I'm doing it my way. It's kind of got this willful energy to it. And this can be very appropriate as long, it's not good to get stuck in it throughout most of your life, but it's really can be a useful phase to kind of allow yourself to go through this, and then of course this doesn't just happen in adolescence, and that's where I like to work with the medicine wheel, the wheel of life, and where it talks about is we kind of go around these cycles. We go through, childhood to adolescent to adulthood to old age. We kind of in the different we go through this developmental cycle. One of the things about the medicine wheel, it's many things, it's a developmental cycle. So we kind of cycle through different aspects of ourselves, developmentally. So there may be some parts of ourselves, even though I'm in an adult body, maybe parts of me are going through this individuation process where I'm taking an aspect of myself creatively, or I'm taking an aspect of my spirituality and I'm making it mine more. I'm embodying it more. I'm integrating it more. And so it might go through this individuation process of making it mine. And then as we move around the wheel, from the south up to the north, that the opposite can happen, where we're taking the individual and we're making it more collective or universal again. So I'm like kind of giving it, an example of that would be maybe I'm starting a family and then I'm realizing it's not all about me anymore. And so I need to think of, instead of what's best for me, I need to think of what's best for the family. I used to call that going from I to we consciousness. And that's a thing where I'm less individual and less individualistic, if you will, and becoming more collective. I'm starting to think it's not about me, it's what's best for the family. And then that could be a very appropriate phase of development as well. But I want to focus a little more this time, on this individuation part. Okay. And a couple examples come to mind, like creatively. And as I think I shared a couple weeks ago, I'm a real fan of music, and there's a couple examples. One will go with Bob Dylan. He, for a long time, he learned his craft of kind of folk playing, and that through, like, Woody Guthrie was one of his mentors. And if you listen to real early Bob Dylan albums, it almost sounds like, I wouldn't say a Woody Guthrie clone, but you can definitely see and hear, I guess, that he was really influenced. And then he did that for a couple of albums, and then pretty soon his own sound started to develop. He individuated. He learned, just like I learned from my dad how to do things, and then I learned Bob, learned how to kind of make the music his. And the rest, of course, is history. Similar in jazz, where Wynton Marsalis, one of my favorite trumpet players, he had a real phase where he sounded a lot like Miles Davis, and his music and his band almost sounded like the Miles Davis Quintet, in the 1965. And at some point, he had 2 or 3 albums, and they were really good, by the way. I kind of liked his Miles Davis phase, in some ways better than his individualized phase, but he had this Miles phase, and then as he worked through that, his music and his tone and that became more individual to him. So those are examples of how this can happen artistically and creatively. I'm sure if you're, a visual artist, you know examples of how this happened with famous artists or even with yourself. An example spiritually, and it's similar to this music thing. When I studied with my teacher for a long time, and there was a long time, even after he passed, that I was really working to do things like I called it the purity of the tradition, right? So I did things like he did them in its purity, and then I got that down to some extent, or get sick of it, or maybe a little of both. Grew into that, and then there got to be this time that it was important that it became my connection to spirit and my expression of shamanism and working with people, and so I had to individuate. Okay, and what did I do this? I did this at 40, 50 years old, right? So it doesn't just happen in adolescence, it can happen at various times. And it's really important to realize that when you're going through these times, there are some potential, some adolescent qualities that maybe we don't want to go through again, or maybe our culture doesn't honor. There can be immaturity. Some of them might be, like I said, rebellion, or being, oppositional, or being, moody, or what's the other one that I'm looking for is kind of being kind of willful, like I want to do it my way, and this came up in the sharing circle last night. And one of our people was in a phase where she really needed to do it her way. It was about her spiritual path, much like I described mine. It was about her spiritual path, and she's at that phase where she needs to do that her way. And spiritually, I've really noticed that this is a tough one for people. It takes a lot of courage to do it your way. There's a lot of people in spirituality and personal growth, and we have these wonderful teachers, right? And it's like, we have the Pema Chodron or Brene Brown, or, different, all these wonderful teachers. I love Adyashanti and some of these teachers. And there's a real tendency to kind of do it their way, right? We listen to their talks, and we read their books. And then it's like we become like we become a little Adyashanti clone. It's just kind of like I did with my teacher. And then at some point, though, if you listen to the teacher themselves, they're probably encouraging you. Don't do it like I did it. This is my expression. This is my path. Find your own way. Or like the Buddha, or like Jesus. Yes, we can learn, but at some point spiritually, I think it depends on your spiritual path and what you want to do. But at some point, it's really useful to make it yours and create your own tradition and your own path to enlightenment and your own way of practicing spirituality. And that can be really scary. This is where a lot of people, don't want to do that. They want to stay with the Carl Jung. They don't go on to their own, whatever could be psychology or spirituality or philosophy, or whatever it is, right? Music, art. And so I really encourage, if maybe you've been this amazing student like I was for 20 years, you did everything just right. And then it gets to be a point where it's time to find your own way to do it. And when you do that, you may recognize some adolescent qualities in yourself that you swore, right, that you would never go through again. And they may not be embraced by our culture. They could be seen as willful or rebellious or whatever else, angsty. And it may be useful. Maybe you need to do something your way for a while. And then what happens is, once, at least did with me and some of my clients, is once we do it our way for a while, and then we have that pushing off the edge of the pool, we used to call it. It's like, I am not doing it like my teacher, and I am not. And then once we get that rebellious, once we do it our way more, it begins to soften, and it becomes more of a natural expression. It doesn't have as much rebellion and angst and willful energy to it anymore. So maybe that willful energy that we've been taught not good, right? It's immature, and it is an immature energy. But sometimes an immature energy is what we need to do something new. Maybe that's where we're at. Maybe we're at the south in the medicine wheel, and we're in that adolescent phase where we need to do it our way. Now, of course, good, as I said before, not to get stuck on that for several years, but to allow yourself to experience it. And it's no, damn it, I want to do this my way. I'm finding my way of doing this. The hell what the other teachers say, the hell what the program says, the hell what the big book says, or what the Bible says, or what. And this gets, it almost sounds a little sacrilegious, right? It's like I need to find it my way, and then that can turn into, we've already have a Pema Children. We don't need another one. We need you. We need your expression of spirituality. So anyway, that is my challenge and my invitation. And that is my video for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome week, and that you just think about, kind of what phase might you be in? Is there a phase where you're needing to do things your way, or are you more like are you individuating, or maybe you're in a phase where you're becoming more collective or more universal. You're going from I to we. Good, I don't know if it's just me, but I think these things are fascinating, and they can really add a lot of awareness and clarity to your journey. I will see you in a week.